I heard them before I saw them. My mother-in-law's voice, sharp and insistent in Italian, cutting through the chatter of our pregnancy announcement party. My husband Marco responded in the same language, his tone hushed but urgent. They stood by the kitchen doorway, thinking they were alone, thinking I couldn't understand a word. "You need to start documenting everything now," Rosa said, her accent thick with certainty. "Every little mistake she makes. Write it all down. Mama, not tonight. Especially tonight. Once the baby comes, we move forward with the plan. A good Italian mother should raise your child, not this American girl who doesn't even know how to make proper ragu." I stood there, one hand on my barely showing belly, the other gripping a glass of sparkling cider. 5 years. For 5 years, I had smiled and nodded while they spoke Italian around me, about me, as if I were invisible. But that night, at what should have been one of the happiest moments of my life, I finally understood every cutting word, and I realized they weren't just talking about me anymore. They were talking about taking my baby. Let me back up. I met Marco Rossini at a food festival in Boston when I was 33. I was there for work, managing the marketing for a local craft brewery, and he was there showcasing his family's Italian restaurant, Rosa's Kitchen, named after his mother. He was handsome in that effortless Mediterranean way, with dark eyes that crinkled when he smiled and hands that moved expressively when he talked about food. We spent 3 hours at that festival, and by the end, I had his number and a standing invitation to dinner at the restaurant. The restaurant became our courtship. Marco would cook for me after hours, teaching me about real Italian food, not the Americanized versions I'd grown up with. His mother Rosa was always there, hovering, watching, commenting in Italian to Marco while shooting me tight smiles. His father had passed away years before, and Rosa ran the restaurant with an iron fist and Marco as her dutiful son. "What's she saying?" I'd ask, laughing, trying to be a good sport. "Oh, just that you have a good appetite," Marco would say, kissing my forehead. "She likes that." I believed him. I wanted to believe him. We married 6 months later in a small ceremony that Rosa barely tolerated. She wore black, like she was attending a funeral. When I asked Marco about it, he said it was an Italian tradition for mothers when their sons marry. I found out years later there was no such tradition. She was mourning what she saw as her son's mistake. The first year of marriage was an adjustment. Marco worked long hours at the restaurant, and Rosa expected me to help out on weekends. I'd arrive in my jeans and sweater, ready to help wherever needed, and she'd look me up and down before launching into rapid Italian with Marco. He'd translate, "She says you can work the register. Stay up front, where customers can see you." I thought she was being nice, putting me in a visible position. I didn't realize she was keeping me away from the kitchen, away from learning the family recipes, away from being part of the real business. Rosa had 2 other sons, Marco's brothers Antonio and Luca, who worked in the kitchen. Their wives, both Italian, knew every family recipe and ran the Sunday prep like a well-oiled machine. They'd chatter away in Italian, laughing at inside jokes I wasn't part of. When I tried to join them, to learn, Rosa would materialize with some task for me elsewhere. "Jessica, go check if table 6 needs anything." "Jessica, the bathroom needs paper towels." "Jessica, count the register again." At family dinners every Sunday, held in the private room above the restaurant, the entire conversation happened in Italian. Marco would occasionally translate snippets for me, but mostly I sat there smiling, eating, feeling more and more like an outsider in my own marriage. "Why don't you teach me?" I asked Marco one night after a particularly long Sunday dinner where I'd understood nothing for 4 hours straight. "Bella, you don't need to learn. I'm here to translate for you. But I want to be part of your family." "You are part of the family." He kissed me, effectively ending the conversation. But I wasn't, and deep down, I knew it. After 2 years of marriage, we started trying for a baby. Marco wanted children, lots of them, like he'd grown up with. Month after month, the pregnancy tests came back negative. Rosa would ask Marco in Italian at Sunday dinners, and he'd shake his head, and she'd shoot me a look that didn't need translation. We went to a fertility specialist. Tests, procedures, medications that made me emotional and bloated. During one appointment, the doctor mentioned that Marco's sperm count was slightly low, nothing alarming but worth noting. When I mentioned this to Marco later, he got defensive. The doctor said it was fine, Jessica. Don't make it into something it's not. At the next Sunday dinner, I watched Rosa and Marco talk in Italian, her hand on his arm, her face sympathetic. Later, I asked what they'd discussed. She was just asking how you're handling the treatments, he said. She knows it's hard on you. That was the night something shifted. The way he said on you. Not on us. On me. Like the infertility was my burden alone. I went home that night and did something I'd been avoiding. I downloaded Duolingo, created an account under a fake name, started learning Italian. It was just curiosity at first, I told myself, just wanting to understand a bit more. I'd practice late at night when Marco worked late shifts, or during my lunch breaks at work. I told Marco I'd joined a yoga class on Tuesday and Thursday evenings. Instead, I drove to a coffee shop an hour away and took online Italian lessons with a tutor in Rome via video chat. "Why do you want to learn?" she asked during our first session, this lovely woman named Francesca, with gray hair and kind eyes. "Family reasons," I said vaguely. She smiled like she understood more than I was saying. "Italian is the language of passion, but also the language of family secrets, you'll see." She was right. It took me 8 months to get conversational, another 4 months to get fluent enough to follow rapid-fire family discussions. I practiced with podcasts, with Italian movies, with the cooking shows Rosa watched in the restaurant kitchen. Marco never noticed. He was so used to tuning me out when Italian was spoken that he never once tested whether I understood. At month 14 of my secret education, I understood my first full Sunday dinner conversation, and I wished I hadn't. "She's dragging him to another specialist next week," Rosa said, passing the pasta, as if the problem isn't obvious. "Mama," one of the brothers' wives said, lowering her voice, "she can hear you." "She doesn't understand Italian, Carla. We've been over this." "Still, I'm just saying, Marco deserves better than a woman who can't give him children. My grandmother always said you can tell a good wife by how quickly she gives her husband sons." I sat there, fork halfway to my mouth, stomach churning. Marco said nothing. Didn't defend me. Just ate his food while his mother talked about me like I was defective furniture he'd made a bad investment in. That night, I started documenting everything. Every conversation I understood, every slight, every moment Marco let his family talk about me without saying a word. But I wasn't prepared for what I'd hear 8 months later, at our pregnancy announcement party. We'd been trying for almost 3 years when it finally happened. 2 pink lines. I cried in the bathroom at work, then called Marco, who whooped so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "We're having a baby, Bella." Finally, we decided to announce it at a family gathering. Rosa insisted on hosting at the restaurant, of course, making it a big production. The whole family came, plus friends, neighbors, regular customers. Everyone was so happy, hugging me, congratulating us. Rosa even kissed both my cheeks, something she'd never done before. I was glowing. This was it, I thought. This baby would finally make me part of the family. This baby would change everything. I was right about that last part, just not in the way I hoped. I was in the hallway, coming back from the bathroom, when I heard Rosa and Marco in the kitchen. They didn't see me. I should have made my presence known. Instead, I stood very still and listened. "You need to start documenting everything now," Rosa said. "Every little mistake she makes, write it all down." "Mama, not tonight. Especially tonight. Once the baby comes, we move forward with the plan. A good Italian mother should raise your child, not this American girl who doesn't even know how to make proper ragu." My blood went cold. "You're talking about taking my baby from me?" I said it in Italian, stepping into the doorway. The looks on their faces would have been funny if my whole world wasn't collapsing. Rosa's mouth actually fell open. Marco went pale. "How long?" Marco whispered. "Long enough?" I said, still in Italian. "Long enough to hear you call our infertility struggles my fault when your sperm count is the one that's low. Long enough to hear your mother call me stupid, lazy, worthless. Long enough to hear you agree with her." "Jessica, I can explain. In Italian or English." My voice was shaking but clear. "Because I'm fluent in both now, Marco. Every word, every insult, every plan to push me out of your life and take my child." Rosa recovered first. "You sneaky little—" "Careful," I said, Because unlike you, I've been recording every family dinner for the past 6 months. Every conversation, including the one just now about documenting my mistakes to build a custody case. That was a bluff. I hadn't recorded anything yet, but the panic in their eyes told me I'd struck gold. They had been planning this. I walked out of that party, drove home, and called my best friend Sarah. She came over immediately, bringing wine I couldn't drink and tissues I definitely could use. "You need a lawyer," she said. "My sister's a family law attorney. I'm calling her right now." "I'm pregnant, Sarah. I can't afford a legal battle. I don't even have savings. Everything's in joint accounts he manages." "Then you start building your case now. Today, tonight," and that's what I did. The next morning, I went to work like normal. Told my boss I needed to update my direct deposit information. Rerouted 10% of my paycheck to a new account Marco didn't know about. Not much, but it was a start. I started actually recording Sunday dinners. Marco's family was so confident I didn't understand that they didn't censor themselves. I got Rosa discussing how they'd prove I was an unfit mother. How they'd show the courts that Marco, with his family support system and stable business, was the better parent. How they'd been documenting every time I showed up late to family events, every meal I didn't eat because morning sickness made me nauseous, every tradition I didn't know because no one had bothered to teach me. "She doesn't even speak Italian," Rosa said one Sunday, 3 months into my pregnancy. What kind of mother can't speak to her child's family? I looked right at her and smiled, touching my belly. In English, I said, "This baby is going to be so loved." Let her think I was clueless. Through my lawyer, Sarah's sister Patricia, I learned my rights. In Massachusetts, recording conversations you're part of is legal. And I was part of these family dinners, even if they treated me like wallpaper. "You're building a strong case," Patricia said, reviewing my evidence. "But Jessica, this is going to get ugly. Are you prepared for that?" I was 6 months pregnant, working full-time, living with a man I no longer trusted, preparing for a legal battle while growing a human. Was I prepared? "I have to be," I said. The hardest part was pretending. Going home every night to Marco, letting him touch my belly and talk about our future, knowing he was documenting everything to use against me later. I became an actress in my own life. I played the role perfectly, the loving wife, the excited mother-to-be, the woman who definitely, absolutely did not speak Italian. At family dinners, I recorded everything while appearing to zone out. I smiled and nodded. I let them talk about me like I wasn't there. And I gathered evidence. "She's gotten so distant," Marco told his mother one Sunday while I was supposedly out of earshot, 8 months pregnant. "Cold, almost. I think the pregnancy hormones are making her unstable." "That's good," Rosa said. "Document it. Emotional instability. That'll help." I saved that recording with the others. 23 separate conversations, 6 months of evidence. My daughter Sophia was born on a Tuesday morning in March. 8 pounds, 2 ounces, with dark hair like her father and my nose. She was perfect. And the moment they put her in my arms, I knew I'd do anything to keep her safe. Marco was tender in the hospital, the doting father. His family visited, bringing gifts, speaking Italian over my hospital bed, about how beautiful the baby was, how she looked just like Rosa as a baby, how it was such a blessing Marco finally had a child even if the mother was, well, they didn't finish that sentence, but I heard it in their silence. I held my daughter and recorded every word. We were home for 2 weeks when Marco served me with papers, divorce, and full custody. I wasn't surprised. I was prepared. "You can see her on weekends," he said, unable to meet my eyes. "We're not trying to keep you away completely." "How generous," I said quietly. His lawyer clearly expected an easy fight. A woman with no savings, no Italian family support, no knowledge of the culture she'd married into. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks out. I spent those 6 weeks working with Patricia, organizing every recording, every documented conversation. We built a timeline showing premeditation, showing that Marco and his family had planned to separate me from my daughter before she was even born. The day of the hearing, I dressed carefully, professional but approachable. I brought a folder with everything organized, labeled, time-stamped. Marco and Rosa sat on the opposite side with their lawyer, looking confident. Rosa actually smirked at me. Marco's lawyer went first, painting a picture of an unstable mother, culturally isolated, unable to provide the family support the child needed. He submitted Marco's documentation. Times I'd been cold or distant during pregnancy, times I'd shown up late to family events, times I'd refused to participate in Italian traditions. My client's family has been in the restaurant business for 3 generations, the lawyer said. They can provide stability, cultural heritage, and a strong family support system. Miss Jessica, by her own admission, doesn't even speak Italian. She cannot give this child the connection to her Italian heritage that she deserves. The judge looked at me. Miss Rossini, would you like to respond? I stood up, smoothed my skirt, and in perfect, fluent Italian, I said, Your Honor, I'd like to submit evidence that shows I understand Italian perfectly, and that my husband and his family have been planning to take my daughter from me since before she was born. The courtroom went silent. Marco's face drained of color. Rosa stood up, shouting in Italian, You lying little... Mrs. Rossini, sit down, the judge said sharply. To me, in English. Continue. I switched to English, playing the first recording. Rosa's voice filled the courtroom. Once the baby comes, we move forward with the plan. A good Italian mother should raise your child, not this American girl. We played 6 recordings that day, each one more damning than the last. The judge's expression got harder with each one. When it was over, she looked at Marco with something close to disgust. Mr. Rossini, I'm denying your petition for full custody. In fact, given the evidence of premeditation and planning to alienate the mother from her child, I'm inclined to grant Miss Rossini primary custody with you receiving supervised visitation until we can establish that you're not going to continue attempting to interfere with her parental rights. Your Honor, Marco's lawyer started. I'm not finished. The evidence shows a clear pattern of emotional abuse and manipulation. Mr. Rossini, you allowed your family to demean and belittle your wife for years. You participated in a plan to separate a mother from her infant, and you submitted false documentation to this court. Be grateful I'm not holding you in contempt. I won. Not just won, crushed them. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. Marco got weekend visitation, supervised at first, then unsupervised once he completed co-parenting classes. I got the house we'd been renting, primary custody, and child support. But more than that, I got my life back. I left my marketing job 6 months after the divorce and took a leap I'd been dreaming about. I opened my own restaurant. Not Italian. God, no. I opened a cozy American bistro called Sophia's Table, named after my daughter. I used everything I'd learned watching Rosa's kitchen, but I made it mine, comfort food with a twist. Southern influences from my grandmother's recipes, fresh New England ingredients, and yes, a few Italian techniques I'd picked up because I could acknowledge that Rosa, for all her faults, knew how to cook. Sarah became my business partner. Patricia, my lawyer, was our first investor. We started small, just 20 tables, but we focused on quality and warmth. The kind of place where everyone feels welcome, where you don't need to speak a secret language to belong. Sophia is 24 now, graduating from culinary school this spring. She speaks fluent Italian, because I made sure of that, but she also speaks English, Spanish, and French. She spent a summer in Rome, met her father's family on her own terms, and came back with her own understanding of who she is. Mom, she said during that trip, Nonna Rosa tried to tell me you trapped Dad with a pregnancy. What did you say? I told her, in Italian, that I'd heard the recordings, that I knew exactly who trapped who. Then I left and had a wonderful week in Tuscany with Dad's cousin Maria, who apparently never liked Rosa much either. My daughter is fierce and kind and exactly who she was meant to be. Marco and I are civil now, friendly even. He remarried a few years ago, has 2 more kids. He eventually apologized. Years later, said his mother had too much influence, that he'd been weak. I accepted the apology because holding on to anger would only hurt me, but I didn't forget. Rosa passed away 3 years ago. Marco called to tell me, asked if I'd come to the funeral. I did, for Sophia's sake. I stood in the back of the church and listened to the service in Italian, understanding every word of praise for a woman who'd tried to steal my child. Afterward, Sophia asked me, Are you okay? Mom? I'm fine, sweetheart. You don't have to be fine. She was awful to you. She was. But she also gave me you, in a weird way. If she hadn't pushed me so hard, I might not have learned Italian, might not have discovered what they were planning, might not have fought so hard to build the life we have now. That's very evolved of you. I've had a lot of therapy. We both laughed. I'm 63 now. Sophia's table has been open for 24 years and has expanded to 3 locations. Last year, we were featured in Bon Appetit. The article talked about how I created spaces where everyone belongs, where language isn't a barrier, where food brings people together instead of dividing them. I never remarried. Dated here and there, but I've been protective of my peace, my space, my hard-won independence. Maybe that makes me cautious, or maybe it just makes me smart. Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if I'd never learned Italian, if I'd stayed ignorant, trusting, believing Marco when he translated selectively and Rosa when she smiled with cold eyes. I might have lost my daughter. Would have, almost certainly. The plan was too detailed, too coordinated. By the time I'd realized what was happening, it would have been too late. Instead, I learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is understand what people think you can't. Knowledge isn't just power. It's survival. I still speak Italian, though rarely. Sophia and I use it sometimes, sharing a private language that's ours now, not theirs. We've reclaimed it, made it something beautiful instead of something weaponized. Last week, a young woman came into the restaurant. She looked tired, worn down, with that specific expression I recognize now, the look of someone who's being made to feel small in her own life. After she ordered, she asked me, "Is it true you opened this place after a bad divorce?" "It is." How did you know when it was time to leave?" I sat down across from her. When I realized they were planning to take my daughter, that was the line. But honestly, I should have left the first time I felt like an outsider in my own marriage. When I had to ask someone else to translate my own life for me. She nodded, tears in her eyes. "I've been learning Portuguese," she whispered. "My boyfriend and his family speak it around me. I wanted to surprise him for his birthday by understanding, but last week I heard them. They were talking about you," I finished. "And it wasn't kind." She nodded. "What are you going to do?" I asked gently. "I don't know yet. But I think understanding what they really think of me, that's a gift, isn't it? Even if it hurts, it's the truth. And the truth always hurts less than living a lie." I gave her my card, not for the restaurant, but with Patricia's law firm on the back. I still keep them handy, just in case. "If you need help," I told her, "there are people who can guide you. You don't have to do this alone." She thanked me, left a generous tip, and walked out looking a little less defeated than when she'd walked in. That's why I tell my story. Not for revenge, not to vilify Marco or his family, but because somewhere out there is another woman sitting at a table, smiling politely while people talk about her in a language they think she doesn't understand. And maybe, just maybe, she'll realize she doesn't have to keep pretending. She doesn't have to stay small to make others comfortable. The cage you're in might feel locked, but I promise you, the door is there. You just have to be brave enough to walk through it. I was 38 when I walked through mine, 5 months pregnant and terrified. I'm 63 now, sitting in my own restaurant, watching my daughter work the room like she was born to it, and I've never been freer. It's never too late to save yourself, and sometimes the first step is as simple as learning the language of your own life.